The military-industrial complex does not exist, and I can prove it to you mathematically. This has come up a couple of times, and I've gone on podcasts, and I get a lot of hate for it.
The military-industrial complex. There's no such thing. No.
But what if the concept of the military-industrial complex is really just a cognitive impediment that just kind of acts like a shorthand for not having to think that hard about the complexities of national defense? Lucky for you, that's all I actually do. And by the end of this video, you will not only see that people who talk about the military-industrial complex are either spouting disinformation intentionally or are misinformed of the facts.
And I would say it's thriving more now than ever before.
So in this video, I'm going to show you the box, I'm going to show you inside of the box and all of the corners. Note that the PDF proof for this video is available for download at ryanmcbeth.substack.com for free. You will be able to recreate any research that I did. But hey, before I get started, I want to talk about a company that fights disinformation as much as me, and that's Ground News. I'm staying down the shore right now with a friend of mine, and my friend is a pretty diehard Democrat. And I'm not into politics, but we were eating, and I asked her, why is former President Trump on trial in New York City? And she was like, because of the elections, because of the elections. And I'm like, how is that a criminal charge? So I opened up Ground News, and I was determined to figure out why President Trump was on trial. Now, lucky for me, Ground News is a news aggregator that gives you bias and factuality ratings for various news sources. I paid for it before they were even a sponsor, and it's part of my morning routine. Now, this article from the Orange County Register is of high factuality and leans right. Or this article from the Independent is of mixed factuality and leans left. And it's kind of interesting how large organizations you thought were committed to facts aren't necessarily so, while a local newspaper might be. Through this, you can kind of figure out the truth. Ground News gives you the ownership data as well, so you know who is telling you what to think. So click the link in the description below or grab the QR code that's somewhere up here or go to ground.news/RyanMcBeth to stay fully informed. Subscribe through my link and get 40% off the Vantage plan for unlimited access this month only. Now let's get back to the military-industrial complex. So let's start where this all began, with General Dwight D. Eisenhower's farewell address. And that's where he first said,
"Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. We annually spend on military security alone more than the net income of all United States corporations. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes."
Now, in order to understand the context of General Eisenhower's quote, you have to understand the context of the time. The 1950s were a literal atomic age of science and technology. In 1950, only 9% of American households had a television set. But by the 1960s, that figure had reached 90%. You know what else was introduced? Credit cards, power steering, diet soda, the handheld transistor radio, the UNIVAC, the first general purpose computer, UNIVAC 1. NASA was founded on October 1st, 1958. We were literally living in the future. Americans had come home from World War II and created a lifestyle that hasn't been seen before, or honestly since. But there was a specter that was hanging over America, the specter of communism and nuclear war. Now, at the time, tech companies and defense companies were kind of the same thing. When I say the word RCA, you probably think of their TVs, or if you're older, maybe RCA records. But they also built radar systems. The radar in the Aegis system that's on American destroyers got its start in an RCA lab. Or when I say the word Texas Instruments, you probably think of calculators. Everyone had a TI-85, right? But they also made the Paveway, America's first laser-guided bomb. Or when I say Motorola, you probably think of the old flip phones, Motorola Razr. But they also built radios for the Army. You know, when President Eisenhower gave that speech back in 1961, he was remembering a time he saw in Germany after World War I. The Treaty of Versailles, which ended World War I, placed severe restrictions on Germany's arms industry. But by 1933, the H-man himself decided to ignore the treaty, and he began a massive rebuilding campaign. Krupp, Messerschmitt, Henkel, Rheinmetall, they all worked hand in hand with the government to pump out as many weapons as possible. Heck, in 1939, Germany had a steelmaking capacity that was second only to America. What are you going to do with so many weapons? You're probably going to use them. In 1945, the U.S. had a total of 6 nuclear weapons. By 1961, that number had risen to 24,126, although not all were the same type or explosive power. Russia was estimated to have maybe 2,400 nuclear weapons. At some point, you got to ask yourself, how many nuclear weapons is enough? And you know, at the time, America had the Pentatomic Army, which is a combination of the words penta, meaning 5, and army. And the whole idea behind the Pentatomic Army was to fight on a nuclear battlefield in Europe. The Army even had their own short-range nuclear missile, the Honest John, which operated at the brigade level. That's right, we gave Army colonels their very own nuclear weapons. And if the Army had them, you know, the Navy had to have them too, right? The Douglas A-3 Sky Warrior was a carrier-capable nuclear bomber. And this race to develop more and better ways of delivering nuclear weapons was certainly a cash cow. We even developed a ballistic missile that could be hung off the wing of a B-52 bomber, although it never quite worked. So maybe back in 1961, Eisenhower was right. Everybody was competing to develop the next high-tech nuclear weapon delivery system. It was crucial to winning the war against the Reds. And something funny happened. We won. On December 26, 1991, the Soviet Union ceased to exist as a nation. And that whole military-industrial complex that people love to hate, they provided the weapons that made Operation Desert Storm the shortest war the world had seen in recent memory. A 100-hour war against Iraq that helped liberate Kuwait. Hey, remember when I talked about how Texas Instruments made the Paveway laser-guided bomb? That bomb was the star of the show during Operation Desert Storm. I mean, for the first time, essentially ever, we could put a bomb through a window. Through a window! Just 55 years before, we were firebombing entire cities, just in the hopes that maybe the fire would get near the factory. And now we could destroy a specific hydraulic press in a specific room of a specific factory without even messing up the employee break room. Operation Desert Storm was the high water mark of American military power. We had nobody left to fight. America entered 1990 with 28 combat divisions spread across the active duty Army, National Guard, and reserves. By the year 2000, that number had shrunk to 10 active duty combat divisions, 8 National Guard combat divisions, and no reserve combat divisions. In 1990, the Air Force had 134 fighter squadrons. The reserves had 12, the National Guard had 45. Today, The Air Force has 48 fighter squadrons, the reserves operate 8, and the National Guard operates 25. In 1990, the U.S. Navy had 546 ships. Today, they have 239. And a lot of that is due to BRAC. The BRAC, or Base Realignment and Closure process, it was initiated to address the issue of excess military bases and facilities as the Cold War was kind of winding down. The goal of BRAC was to increase the efficiency of the military by closing unnecessary installations and realigning others to better support defense needs. BRAC started closing bases with multiple rounds in 1988, 1991, 1993, 1995, and 2005. Remember that TV show House of Cards before things got weird? One major plot point of that show was that the main character, Frank Underwood, was demanding a congressman vote to close a shipyard in that congressman's home city of Philadelphia. That was kind of a BRAC-like commission.
What are we going to do about the shipyard?
BRAC had their hearing. They slated it for closing.
And the Philadelphia shipyard really was closed in a round of BRAC cuts, although it was back in 1991. In fact, 1991 saw the closing of multiple air bases, naval yards, and army installations, which kind of leads you to wonder, if the military-industrial complex is so vast and has congressmen pulling strings to funnel money directly from the government into defense, why the hell are we trying to be more efficient? If the military-industrial complex just existed to make the military bigger and buy more weapons and systems that we didn't need, what the heck was BRAC? From 1991 to 1998, the defense budget dropped by more than 15%. And right in the middle of those two dates was a dinner. On July 21st, 1993, a dinner was organized by then Secretary of Defense Les Aspin. The dinner was held at the Pentagon and included the top 15 or so major defense contractors. After the meal, the executives were shunted into a smaller private room with a slide projector. And the graph that was projected on the screen was not something they wanted to see. The chart showed how many companies in various categories of military equipment existed currently and how many companies the Defense Department was going to be able to afford to keep in business. This meeting became known as the Last Supper. And it was on that day that the military-industrial complex, at least as Eisenhower knew it, died. July 21st, 1993. What came next was the Great Merger. Lockheed Corporation merged with Martin Marietta in 1995 to form Lockheed Martin, becoming one of the largest defense contractors globally. Northrop Corporation merged with Grumman Corporation in 1994 to create Northrop Grumman, another major player in the defense sector. Boeing acquired McDonnell Douglas in 1997, significantly expanding Boeing's defense and aerospace capabilities. Raytheon acquired the defense electronics and missile business of Hughes Aircraft in 1997, strengthening its position in the defense industry. General Dynamics purchased Bath Iron Works, which further consolidated its shipbuilding capabilities. Smaller defense companies were swallowed up until there were basically only 5 remaining. Now, this list leaves out the smaller players and subcontractors. After all, just because Lockheed Martin makes the F-35, it doesn't mean they make every part and every screw. People often criticize the F-35, saying it's made in 48 different states and 10 different countries, which makes it impossible to kill because no politician wants the jobs to leave their district. But what if that's just the nature of modern manufacturing? How many parts does a pencil have? Well, it has 5. The graphite is from Brazil, the wood is from Sweden, the paint is from Estonia, the rubber is from Malaysia, and the metal is from Mozambique. So let's take a look at just one part of the F-35, the tires. Dunlop makes the tires for the F-35 in Birmingham, England. Dunlop mainly gets its rubber from Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand. The main manufacturing plant for the F-35 is in Fort Worth, Texas. Not a lot of rubber trees in Fort Worth, Texas. Now, multiply that times the 300,000 or so parts it's estimated to go into the F-35. Remember, there's 3 different variants of F-35. It's a miracle we can build it at all. So, if you're not convinced that consolidation didn't kill the military-industrial complex, Let's take a look at profit. I mean, the military-industrial complex was really so vast and powerful and had an unlimited funnel of money going from your pocket to theirs, it would certainly be profitable, right? We're just pumping out ships and tanks and planes, whether they work or not. Surely their profits must be to the moon. Oh, but this is a Ryan Macbeth video, so I did the math. Net earnings for the top 5 defense companies, Boeing Company, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman, were $13.2 billion. That's for all 5 of them. And Boeing actually lost money. Still all right. All right, 13.2. That kind of sounds like a tidy profit. Let's look at the top 5 of big tech. Amazon, Apple, Alphabet, Microsoft, Meta. Their combined profits were $312 billion. And of that number, Apple, just Apple, had almost $97 billion in profits. This is in 2023. Okay, so let's take a look at the pharmaceutical companies from 2023. Johnson & Johnson, Merck, Pfizer, Abbrev, Bristol Myers Squibb. They made a total of $50.6 billion in profit. So let's take a look at consumer products. PepsiCo, Procter & Gamble, Tyson's, Nike, Coca-Cola. They made a total of $38.8 billion. Procter & Gamble, a company that makes toothpaste and detergent, made $14.6 billion in profit in 2023. That is more than all of America's defense companies combined. What business would you rather be in? Diapers or F-35? You know, one more thing. I know in the comment section people are going to say that the real revenue is classified. Let me tell you a little something about a little organization called the Securities and Exchange Commission. If you've ever been on the wrong side of a securities fraud investigation, you'll know that the numbers in those reports are accurate. They have to be. There is no secret revenue section. The revenue is the revenue. If there was some kind of secret revenue that wasn't in the annual report, and a shareholder found out about it, it would make what Carl Icahn did to Yahoo's board look like an episode of Teletubbies. I work for a defense contractor, the Texas Aeromed Lab. We developed AI-powered drones that deliver whole blood to wounded soldiers. I can tell you it is not easy. First of all, if you're Procter & Gamble, you can sell your product to just about anyone. But if you're a defense contractor, you have a very limited market with a lot of regulations on what you're selling. It's not a great business. Just working for the Aeromed Lab, I see how crazy it is to apply for grant money and all the papers we have to write just to get our foot in the door to a meeting with the government. Nobody in their right mind chooses defense tech as a business. When you're competing for contracts, you have to do a heck of a lot of work, and then if you get some fixed bid contract and you encounter something unforeseen, that's not the government's problem, that's your problem. And you have to abide by the terms of the contract. And if none of this convinces you, what if I showed you a chart of defense spending as a percentage of gross domestic product? In 1961, the United States spent approximately 9.2% of its gross domestic product on defense. This was during the Cold War, and significant defense spending was a priority for the U.S. due to the ongoing tensions with the Soviet Union. But today, we only spend 3.4% of our gross domestic product on defense. So if the military-industrial complex exists, why is spending so low? Heck, maybe spending should be more. So if the military-industrial complex was no longer the power that it was, and really hasn't been in 30 years since the Last Supper, why do we keep saying those words? Military-industrial complex. Well, there's an easy cadence to the phrase military-industrial complex. It is a complex set of words that somehow rolls off the tongue. And people think they sound smarter than when they say it because it kind of implies they know something about geopolitics, even if they've never cracked an annual report like I did. But the real reason may be Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. The lie about the military-industrial complex is very useful as a get-out-of-consequences-free card when one of those countries wants to do something bad. Russia invades Ukraine. You can't oppose them because that's what the military-industrial complex wants. Who cares if Procter & Gamble, a company that sells toothpaste and detergent, makes more money than all of the major defense companies combined? But you're the one being fooled. The military-industrial complex is a lie that our adversaries perpetuate to convince you that they should be allowed to invade whomever they want without consequences. Consequences that will come from those very defense companies that you are trained to loathe. Once again, all this information is freely available for download at ryanmcbeth.substack.com. Thank you for watching.
In a world where fashion meets firepower, where style becomes strategy, it's time to gear up for the ultimate mission with Bunker branding. Introducing the Rock Out With Your Chalk Out t-shirt, a tribute to the fearless air cavalry. Feel the adrenaline rush as you don the pride of the skies. For those of you who dare from the air, precision and power unite when you think outside the bomb. And don't miss our Live, Laugh, Launch t-shirts for Patriot and HIMARS, because sometimes defending freedom means bringing the thunder. Finally, for the true defender of the seas, we present Department of the Boat People. Sail with honor and show your allegiance to the world's mightiest maritime force. With these shirts, hoodies, and stickers, along with the tow missile, landmines, and drone warfare. These aren't just shirts, they're statements. They're your way of saying I stand for strength, unity, and style. Get yours at Bunker Branding today.